Good evening, everybody, and welcome to South Pacific Private's Facebook Live on Understanding Addiction. We're going to talk tonight about addiction in all its forms. And before I begin, and as people are logging on, I just want to acknowledge the Gayamagal people. The part of the Eora Nation is the traditional owners and custodians upon the land in which we work and recover. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So as we're just settling in, we thought we'd do this Facebook Live a little later, conscious that many of us have families to feed and organise in the evening, so we're starting this one at 7 o'clock, hopefully to make it a bit easier for you to log on. So we're talking about addiction in all its forms, and I want to talk two ways. The first way for speak to the people who may be struggling with some form of addiction, and also to recognise that loved ones and families of the person who's suffering with an addiction may also need assistance. At South Pacific we have that two-pronged treatment program pathway, and I think it works very well. I've seen some remarkable things happen in people's lives since I've been part of the South Pacific team. So what's addiction? And what constitutes addiction? It falls into two categories, really. We have substances, drugs and alcohol, of course, the main one. Any sort of prescription medication might come into that. And we have then gambling, which of course today includes the online gaming, social media and device addiction, phones, internet. We have disordered eating, and we have work. So it's across a broad spectrum, and I'll probably talk tonight mainly about alcohol and drugs, because that's the big one for most families. And they can be devastating. They're devastating not only to the person who has the addiction, but the people who live with it. And just by way of disclosure, I live in two camps. I was raised by people who were in active addiction, and I actually also am in recovery from my own addiction. So I've sat in both camps, so I understand what it's like. Could I turn my volume up? Absolutely. Thank you, Greg. Good call. Hope that's a bit better. Let me know if it isn't. When we're talking about addiction, we're talking about using a substance or a behaviour to change the way we feel. That is, in its essence, what we're talking about. And many people have dependencies on all sorts of things, but we're talking about addiction as a chronic, complex illness, which is characterised by the compulsive use of the drug or behaviour, and the continuing use of the drug or behaviour, even when it's very obvious that the devastating effects of the use of it, are putting us on our knees, really. So it's intense and devastating for the individual, and it's intense and devastating for the partners and the families. And often it's the addict themselves or the alcoholic themselves that is in denial, total denial about what's happening to them. Everyone around them can see it, of course, but the addict has no idea. Now, the other aspect of this, and this often happens in South Pacific, people will come into South Pacific and you say, you know, what do you hear from? They say, I'm here for depression and anxiety. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh when I say that, because it's a dual diagnosis. You show me an addict who's an alcoholic or using drugs or some sort of behaviour, and I'll show you someone who's not only in addiction, but they've also got some mood disorder, so that they've got anxiety and depression at the same time. the other point I want to make while I'm just sort of setting the tone for this is there's also a lot to be said for the disordered eating and that we're struggling with a lot in young men and women today, and of course people who are still not in recovery who've been struggling with it all their lives. So, in terms of what is addiction, I think it's very clear that it's a chronic condition, it's an illness. World Health Organization believes it's an illness, where it's South Pacific treated as an illness. It's not a choice. And there are certain types of addictions, as I've said, there's the substances and then there's the behaviours. And oftentimes what you'll find is that people will start with one, so that perhaps they start with alcohol addiction, or alcoholism as we call it, and then after a period of time it has dovetailed into a number of others. They might have picked up gambling or drugs as well. So the complexity can be across the board, not only with the first substance they started with, but also the behaviour that exhibits. People become addicted to drugs for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is genetically there's impact, how we were raised, if we have trauma in our early childhood or throughout our life, there will be economic impacts. So there's a whole lot. But generally you'll find that people become addicted because they start to use the substance, they get released from the internal distress that they're living with. The brain, of course, reacts and loves the dopamine hit it gets, and then the brain changes the longer that we use the substance, and so we have to continue to drink more, use more to get the same effect. It will often be not until the addict is on their knees and struggling with their life and the consequences of their addiction that they'll actually start to reach out for help. When an addict's resistant to help, it will sound like this. This was my one. I'm choosing to do this. I can choose to stop right now, and I'm choosing to keep going. Now, I actually absolutely believed that if I chose to stop using the alcohol and drugs that I was taking, that I could do that. I was in such delusion, it was unbelievable. And it wasn't until I was sometime into my abstinence and my recovery that I realised how delusional that actually was. Another one is, when I get as bad as you, I'll do something about it, pointing across the room to somebody else. Other people have it worse than I do, I'm okay. I don't want to lose my friends, they won't understand if I stop. The categorical denial of I'm not a drug addict and I'm not an alcoholic. The good one is I'm not hurting anybody but me. My addiction's the only thing that makes me feel better. I'm not going to give that up. I've tried everything, nothing works. There's no point in even trying anymore. I'm just broken. I hate that word broken. It just denotes we can't actually heal. Nobody understands what I'm going through. There's no way they can help me. And the piece to resistance really is I'm not going to a 12-step program. They can't help me. So that's what resistance sounds like. Now, for the families that are dealing with people who are struggling with their addiction, who can see the devastation that's happening in their lives, the one thing I would say to you is that you need help for you. I mean, there's a classic line I often say to clients, you can see what the alcohol and drugs are doing to your son, partner, friend. Can you see what it's doing to you? Do you see the devastation that you are living with? And perhaps you need to get some help for you. When we're actually at the point where we're actually starting to look like we might want to surrender, it will start to sound like this. It will change. I can't do this on my own. I need help. I'm ready to try something different. I need to take responsibility for my actions. I'm committed to do whatever it takes to recover from my addiction. Or just the simple words of I'm an addict or I'm an alcoholic. I don't know what to do. There's a line in 12-Step Recovery which says, without help it is too much for us. And it's not until an addict or an alcoholic gets to that point that they'll actually start to do what's necessary to overcome addiction, which is not an easy road, and it is a forever after road. It's not like we stop for a little bit and then we suddenly are all tickety-boo and we can have a few drinks. It doesn't work like that. The signs and indicators are when addiction actually addiction comes before everything else. The substance comes before everything else. The promises are made, I'll be there on time, I won't be late to the kids' concert. I'll be there on time, I won't be late, you know. Of course, I'm coming to your wedding, no problem at all. There's no way I'd misbehave at your wedding. I'm my best friend, and of course, guess what happens? And we've all been there and we've all witnessed it. If you're listening tonight, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It is not that the intention of the addict is not sincere. It's that they're past the point of having any control at all over the say of whether they drink or they don't. Now, the other one I want to mention is when I see people who come in to recovery, they might come into South Pacific and they'll, yep, clear, got it, I know exactly what I've got to do. They'll start seeing a therapist, they'll start doing 12-step recovery. Within 3 to 6 months, they're starting to turn their life around, and then suddenly they don't need it anymore. It's like I'm all better now, and I stop. And when I stop going and doing the things that have helped me, like seeing the therapist, going to 12-step recovery, I start to actually undo all that great work, and I will end up back to where I was before I started the recovery, and it will get worse. People who are in early recovery never believe me when I tell them that. It's exactly what happens. So when social use slips into addiction, two things: out of control, we'll start to try and change how we use the substance. Instead of drinking daily, we'll drink only on the weekends. Instead of drinking at night, we'll only drink at lunchtime. You know, I mean, we do all sorts of, I change drinks. That's the classic one. Let's just change the drinks we use. Or, you know, I won't use the substance with the drink. Or I'll only gamble, I won't use the drink. You know, it goes on and on and on. There's any sort of complexity that we can do to help to not be in, to not actually be able to say, I'm actually in trouble with this. So the indicators for those around you are off the Richter scale. And I will often say to addicts and alcoholics, what is your family saying to you? What's your partner saying to you? And usually it'll be, you need to stop or you need to change something because we can't live with you. And that's when it's getting into that chronic stage. Now, the pathway to recovery, it's difficult. We will not go into recovery until we're absolutely on our knees. But when we reach out, for example, for help, help is available. Instead of living in the problem, that is the addiction, we live in the solution. And when we reach out for help, we will be given an option. We work a lot at South Pacific with dual diagnosis. There would be, as I said earlier, there'd be very few people who come in with addiction who haven't got some other sort of mental disorder going on, whether it's anxiety or depression, or bipolar, complex PTSD, and we work with both. And I often say to clients when I'm working with them at South Pacific, if you think you're going to come in here and look at all your childhood trauma, for example, and then you're going to be okay and you can have a few drinks, think again. We're talking about two different things. Addiction in and of itself, alcoholism in and of itself, in all its forms, is an illness. It needs to be treated therapeutically with abstinence and 12-step recovery. That is the best solution. There's a report that they handed down called the Cochrane Report. It's very well known in our profession. And it was, they looked at 12-step programs to see how effective they were. And they came up with the view after, I think they canvassed 8,000 people, that 12-step programs were the most successful method for people who wanted recovery from alcoholism and, of course, Narcotics Anonymous, drug addiction, Gamblers Anonymous, gambling addiction, and so it goes on. And there's a whole variety of 12-step programs. So we actually work at South Pacific and we attack the problem from two sides. The childhood trauma in and of itself gets addressed through the group work, the therapeutic work. Perhaps you do changes if you come in, that's the childhood trauma program. Working with what happened to you when you're a child, that's therapeutically. And the addiction has to be worked with with abstinence and 12-step recovery. If you do both those things, you will recover. There is no doubt in my mind that that will be what will happen. The pathways to recovery are supported once you've left South Pacific. There's transitions program, relational recovery, mastering moods, all sorts of day programs to support people once they've finished their inpatient stay of 3 weeks. And it's designed to allow you to settle back into life as a person who's in recovery. In South Pacific, we do detox people. It's not uncommon for people who come in South Pacific to have one last hurrah before they come in. We treat them with the psychiatrists who are highly skilled with addiction, the GPs, again, highly skilled with addiction, and they work with you to settle you so you can land in the program and then go into your group and then do your work in the group. One other thing I want to talk about, thank you, Dean. I can see that you've logged on. Hello, David. Thank you. 2.5 years sober. Wow, that is fabulous. There are people who have long-term recovery. Back in the day when I first got sober, we weren't talking so much about childhood trauma. We weren't talking about the impact that our childhood had on us. And so now there are many people in recovery who struggle with a bit of depression and anxiety, who find it difficult, who don't know what they're doing wrong, and they're actually not doing anything wrong. They're in their programs, they're in their 12-step recovery, they're sponsoring people, they're being of service, and sometimes they will reach out to me and say, what am I going to do? Now, I always suggest them come in and do some deeper childhood trauma work, because that's where the hook is. And very recently I had a gentleman who was on antidepressants, did not want to take them anymore, stopped taking them. That is not a wise move, let me tell you. Do not do that without somebody helping you, like a professional, a psychiatrist. Went into a black depression and became quite suicidal. Now, he reached out to me. We got him into South Pacific, and our clinical director, Ash Party, was looking after him, Dr. Ash Party. And he got back on his medication, was stabilised, did some more trauma work, and has come out and it's just realigned his entire world. He's been sober a long time, this man. And I said to him the other day, you know, there has to be acceptance somewhere that some people need to take medication. Now, we can do a program as a daily program, but you might actually need to take medication forever. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is to keep you well, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And so the support's available, and the support's available in a variety of forms. But principally it's because we work with dual diagnosis. We're aware of the impact your child has had on you. We're aware that you're in addiction and you don't know what to do about it. And we're there to help that. Now, before I finish, I want to talk to the families. Great, lovely to hear from you, Nathan. Sorry, I'm not scrolling through the messages, and I should be. Let's have a look. Right. Okay. When we're talking to the families, I recently had a situation where a lady, I think she'd listened to a Facebook Live. She'd never had anything to do with South Pacific in her life. And her son's, I believe, on her say-so, is an addict, alcoholic, an addict. And she was a mess. She didn't know what to do. She was trying to support him by enabling him. She didn't realise she was even doing that. He wasn't working. He was living at home. You can, fill in the gaps yourself if you've been there. And then she wanted me to try and help him, and I said, well, look, I don't think he's ready to be helped just yet. And I can send him onto another therapist. But I'd like you to have a little bit of a look at the Family Education Day that South Pacific runs, so you can learn a bit about addiction and childhood trauma and things, so you can know how to manage this relationship with him. Because I do think that you're not making it easy on him to fall into a hole. She kept propping him up all the time. Now, I understand that. She's a mum. She loves her son. Doesn't matter how old he is. She doesn't want him to die. I understand that. I'm a mother myself. I totally get it. But I said to her, there are ways that we can manage it and start to set boundaries with the people that we love. We can do loving detachment. We don't have to be hard and fast, but we do have to actually start to name what's happening in the home. So she did the Family Education Day, and then she said, I can't wait to get him into South Pacific so we can come and do the family program, which is the 4-day program. And it totally turned it around for her and her husband, who knew nothing about addiction, who had no idea what they were dealing with. And so they actually started to really feel like, they were able to manage and have conversations with him. Hi, Sam. Thank you. Tia, I'm a support worker with the Australian. Beautiful. That's wonderful that you're in that anti-ice campaign. That's a tough drug. My sister completed Cheryl. Hang on, where's Cheryl gone? Here she is. So my sister completed the South Pacific multiple. She received no because she returned to drinking 15 and the police found her passed away. Well, that is very sad news. I'm very sad to hear that. I would be, none of us want that to be happening to anybody. And you have my deep sympathy about that. Katrina, how do you go about asking a loved one to admit they're an addict? As a mother, it's very distressing to watch your child waste. I don't know how to help him. Katrina, I was just talking about being able to attend the Family Education Day program, which is just one day online, so you can actually start to open up the dialogue with him, and perhaps with support of other family members if you have them. I think that would be a helpful way to start. Addicts in and of themselves can be very cunning and, pull the wool over our eyes, and we want to believe the best, and sometimes they're just not able to be in reality with what's happening to them, and they need us to step in. I'm very interested in your message to family, trying to help a friend begin his dual diagnosis. His family is taking control of his, but naturally afraid of concepts around it. Yeah. And look, I'm totally hear you, and I don't want to be exacerbating what's already a very inflamed situation. I'm just saying to the broader community, that's what we deal with at South Pacific. When we talk about introducing them safely and gently, we talk about doing it with love. I'm concerned about how you're living your life. I'm watching your demise, maybe, talking about what it was like a year or two ago, what it is like now. And I think that when we talk about early childhood trauma, the family always takes it on themselves and thinks, well, you're blaming me because of what's happening to him. That's not what we're doing. It's not what we're trying to do. What we are trying to do is, first of all, let's deal with, it's the concept, Nathan. Let's deal with the distress first. Let's get them into recovery if we can. see if they'll come in, do a program, look at their drinking and using, and see if they can't get some clarity around it. Oftentimes people will come in and they're ambivalent about whether they are or they aren't. And they'll go in for depression and anxiety, which I said at the beginning, and then they suddenly, as they start to talk to other clients, because, I mean, South Pacific's a treatment centre. We treat addiction, PTSD, mood disorder, 54-bed hospital, state-of-the-art programs. You know, if the person wants the help, it is there. What's this one here from Deb? I get so much, sorry. South Pacific, 4 years ago, did changes with you, I remember, Deb, and haven't relapsed. Beautiful. Don't ever want to get complacent, though, as I relapsed after 20 years. I totally hear that. And we can get complacent. That's what I was talking about earlier, about trying to stay in the solution, not in the problem. So support's available, and please, if you're working with someone who's an addict and an alcoholic, and they're, or in any form of addiction, I was reading on the South Pacific page today a blog that was written by one client named Nathan, and he was and is still in recovery. You can jump on and read his blog. He's a gambler. He gambled and had alcoholism. And I think he's 6 years clean and sober now. Now, that man came in looking like he was going to lose everything. And he's rebuilt his life, retrained in another field. I mean, if you want to recover, you can. The help is there and it's available. And so I would actually, if anybody's got any questions around this, I would support you to reach out to Intake at South Pacific, 1-800 numbers on the website. There we are. 7 years. Nathan, there you are. Went for gambling, dealt with alcohol and drugs as comorbidities. Beautiful. Still clean 7 years later. How fabulous. Nathan, another Nathan, 100%, and thank you. My experience at South Pacific have been life-changing, and I hope to return for changes through the family education. Sounds like a great first step for my friend. Yeah, it's very helpful, because you got to remember, a lot of people don't know any of this. I mean, God knows, none of us knew it before we got in here. Oh, here we are. There's Nathan's blog. That's up. Have a read of that. Wow, that's powerful stuff. Thank you, Nathan, both of you. Right, Wendy did South Pacific in 2000. Fabulous. Now work as an alcohol and drug counsellor and case manager. Beautiful. SP family groups are life-changing. Addiction is a family disease. Isn't that so true? And aren't we all grateful that we can talk about this now? Because certainly when I came into recovery a million years ago, there's still a shame attached to even saying that you were an alcoholic. I mean, when I came into recovery, NA hadn't started in Sydney. I mean, my goodness, it was a long while ago. And here we all are, still here looking fabulous. So I think we're nearly coming to the end. I want to thank you for logging on tonight. I hope it's been a bit helpful. It's a big subject, addiction. There's a lot to cover. So to help, just to finish off, to help someone with addiction, you can. Remember, addiction's a disease and not a choice or a moral failing. Recognise the problem and talk to them. Be prepared for various reactions, sadness to anger, and consider how you'll react and how can you hold the space for them. And sometimes we just need to pause and be quiet. Don't try and talk to them where they're high or drunk about getting help, because that'll just be a waste of time. See if you can convince them to at least reach out and do an intake call with inpatient rehab, or at the very best get an alcohol and drug counsellor. Offer support without trying to sound judgmental. It's hard because they're difficult. please try not to be patronising about their alcohol or drugs use. Talk through the consequences. Please don't enable the addiction. No means no, it doesn't mean maybe. Consider an intervention. That might be a professional that helps you with that. And most of all, if you're living with someone else's addiction, you seek help for yourself. And the help for yourself could be the Family Education Day, could be going to Al-Anon, both fabulous programs, could be Nar-Anon. I've got a client who was in South Pacific for depression and anxiety because his wife is a gambler. He's going to Gam-Anon. It's very helpful, he said. It's very helpful just to sit and talk to other people who are struggling with it. Thank you, Deborah. Arabella, treatment does save lives. It's not always perfect. No, and God knows life is not always perfect. It saved my daughter's life. Wonderful. Nathan, honesty overminded was the how of the program. Isn't that the truth? Denise, 7 days until 1 year. Still looking for a sponsor. Is there an easy way of asking? Yes. Just find somebody in the rooms that you think has a kind of quality of recovery you like and ask them, would you help me? And another tip might be, will you just be my temporary sponsor? That is, sponsor me for 3 months while we get to know one another and then see where it goes. Joshua, thank you. Great work. DISPP is a great program for people with their addiction and their families. Okay, I think we've gone through most of the comments. Thank you, Linky. So grateful for tonight. I'm grateful too. Okay, help available. Reach out for help. Do not do it alone. You do not have to do this alone. Remember the line I quoted out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Without help, it is too much for us. And that's across the board in many things in life. So, thank you for joining us for the night. We are here. If you need help, we're here to help. And I encourage you to reach out. And even if you don't actually have, if you don't, your loved one who's unwell isn't ready to get into recovery, you might be ready to take some steps. I've seen families change the dance steps with the addict and alcoholic in their life, and it's had a reverberating effect on the addict and alcoholic. It's worth reaching out for help. Do not do it alone. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Gently, gently, a day at a time.